The Possession of Avery Michaels, A Journey into Darkness. Avery sought refuge in Aokigahara forest, hoping to escape the unrelenting pressures of her daily life. But not even an hour after she arrived, strange occurrences began to unfold. The wind seemed to howl in unnatural ways, the leaves on the ground twisted and twirled in unnatural patterns, and a haunting feeling of being watched clung to her every move, even though she was miles away from civilization. The once soothing sounds of the forest were replaced with a deafening silence that filled her with a sense of unease. Suddenly, she was consumed by an overwhelming feeling of terror that seemed to radiate from the very trees around her. She had never felt something of this sheer power before. As she gasped for air, she felt a tremendous presence rush up behind her, and a deep, demonic voice whispered a single word that chilled her to her core: fear. Her body shook with terror as she ran blindly through the forest, tears streaming down her face. Little did she know that the source of her torment would only grow stronger with each passing moment, feeding on her very soul until there was nothing left but a hollow shell of the girl she once was. As her terror grew, Avery's legs carried her faster and faster through the tangled underbrush of the forest floor. Her heart raced and her lungs burned as she gasped for air. She didn't know where she was going, but all she knew was that she needed to get away from whatever was chasing her. Her mind raced with thoughts of escape, but every path seemed to lead to a dead end. The forest seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with its oppressive atmosphere. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't stop running, her body consumed by the primal urge to survive. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing in a heap on the ground, gasping for breath. But even as she lay there, her body racked with exhaustion, she knew that she couldn't let her guard down. This thing was still out there, still hunting her, and she had to keep moving if she wanted to stay alive. She stumbled and ran through the thick underbrush for what felt like days. She felt her legs giving out beneath her. The fear and panic that had gripped her since she entered the forest were slowly being replaced by a growing sense of hopelessness. This presence was everywhere, pressing in on her from all sides, and she knew that she could never escape it. As her mind began to fray, the manifestation of this feeling started to reveal itself to her in a more terrifying form. It appeared to her with skin black as coal, eyes that glow like dying embers, and with razor-sharp talons that could tear at your mind, leaving her with nothing but a guttural, animalistic fear. The demon slowly advanced towards Avery, who took a step back with each step it took forward. She could feel the darkness closing in around her, threatening to swallow her whole. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "I am not weak," she whispered, opening her eyes and meeting the demon's gaze. "I may be afraid, but I am not weak." The demon's eyes narrowed, and it let out a low growl. "You think that will save you, Avery? You are nothing compared to me. I am the darkness that consumes you, the fear that grips your heart. You cannot defeat me." She felt a surge of anger rise within her, pushing aside her fear. "I may not be able to defeat you alone, but I will not give up. I will find a way to break free from your grip, no matter what it takes." The demon's lips curled into a sinister smile, and with that, it disappeared into the shadows, leaving Avery alone with her thoughts and her resolve. Avery's torment grew worse and worse. The demon's grip on her mind tightened with every passing moment, until she could barely recognize her own thoughts anymore. It was as if the demon had become a part of her, a dark and malevolent force that coiled around her soul like a snake, squeezing tighter and tighter until she thought she would be crushed. Her mind became a battleground, with the demon constantly whispering in her ear, filling her head with twisted visions and poisonous thoughts. It seemed to know all her fears and insecurities, using them to manipulate her in ways she never thought possible. She found herself thinking things she never thought she was capable of, about acts of violence, reveling in the imagined pain of others. The demon had found a way to tap into the darkest recesses of her mind, and Avery felt helpless to resist its pull. As time went on, Avery began to lose herself in the madness. The demon's voice became the only thing she could hear, and she found herself consumed by it. She was consumed by a darkness that seemed to have no end, and she knew that the demon's grip on her was unbreakable. It had taken root in her soul, and was slowly consuming her from the inside out. As she collapsed onto the ground, she knew that there was no escape from the demon's grasp. It had driven her to the brink of madness, and there was no turning back. In her final moments of lucidity, she tried to comprehend the dark force behind her pain, but her efforts were ultimately futile and she fell into a trance. The demon took to tormenting Avery's pride. It whispered into her ear, feeding her delusions that she was better than everyone else, that she was above the rules, and that she didn't need anyone's help. Avery, who had always been confident and self-assured, was giving in to the seductions and began to let go of her guard and be consumed by the falsehoods blinding her reason and corrupting her ego. The demon fed on her arrogance, pushing her to make reckless decisions. It convinced her that she didn't need anyone else, that her way, all alone, was the best way, and that everyone else would be jealous of her success. Avery's pride, once a source of strength, had become her downfall. This mental attack intensified, showing Avery visions of herself as a powerful and successful leader, one who was worshipped and adored by all. It was an alluring image, and Avery couldn't resist the temptation. She began to believe that she was destined for greatness, that nothing could stop her. But as the visions continued, they became more twisted and disturbing. Avery saw herself as a cruel tyrant, ruling with an iron fist and crushing anyone who dared to oppose her. The demon cackled with glee as Avery's ego consumed her, knowing that soon it would have full control over her mind and soul. The demon reveled in Avery's greed next. It delighted in the pain it could cause her by twisting her desires and using them against her. Memories flooded back to Avery, memories she had long since buried. She remembered the time she had stolen from her own struggling mother, not because she had to, but simply for her want for material things and the hurt expression on her mother's face when she found out. She had brushed it off at the time, but now it seemed to loom over her like a dark cloud. The demon used this memory to torment her, making her relive all the times she hurt the people around her over and over again. It whispered in her ear, telling her that her greed was the cause of all her problems. The demon showed Avery visions of wealth beyond her wildest dreams, offering her everything she had ever dreamed of and more, and once her face lit up with the slightest amount of recognition, it was all ripped away in an instant, and she was left there alone with her thoughts in a dark, empty void. This mysterious power seemed to grow the more increasingly damaged Avery's mental state began to become, and in her increasingly fragile state, he strikes again, presenting her with vivid hallucinations of past encounters where she has used her sexuality to manipulate and control those around her. She sees herself, a willing participant in each scenario, taking pleasure in using her body to get what she wants, no matter the cost and with no regard to the other person involved. The demon whispers in her ear, reminding her of the pain and destruction she has caused in her quest for gratification. He shows her images of her past lovers, twisting their faces into grotesque masks of betrayal and disdain, taunting her with the knowledge that they used her just as much as she used them. The demon gleefully points out how she has left a trail of destruction in her wake, breaking hearts and causing pain to all those who dare to love her. He tells her that her lust has blinded her to the truth and that she is truly alone, a shell of a person, consumed by her own desires. She screams in agony, unable to bear the weight of her own sins, but her screams are drowned out by the demon's cackles of delight, relishing in the destruction of her soul. The demon was not done yet and was hungry for more pain. He relished in her envy, and he made sure she knew it. He twisted her thoughts until all she could feel was the deep-seated jealousy that had been brewing inside of her for years. The demon used Avery's thoughts to torment her with past memories of how she had hurt others. He showed her the faces of the people she had betrayed and the pain they had gone through because of her actions. Avery couldn't escape the nightmare. It was like a never-ending loop of her own misdeeds playing on repeat in her mind. The demon whispered in her ear, reminding her of how she had always been jealous of her friend's success and how she had tried sabotaging them just to make herself look better. She could feel the guilt and shame eating away at her soul, and the demon fed on it. His power grew by the second, and she could barely withstand the pressure building around her. He made her believe that she was unworthy of forgiveness and love, and that she would never be able to make up for the pain she had caused others. The demon's taunts grew louder and more vicious, and she was left feeling like a shell of her former self, consumed by her own jealousy and the demon's relentless torture. He showed her vivid images of herself consuming vast amounts of food to the point of sickness and then purging it all back up, only to repeat the cycle again and again. The demon whispered in her ear, "You have always been insatiable, haven't you, Avery? You never know when enough is enough. You never think about the consequences of your actions. You just want more and more and more. Look at what you've done to yourself." The demon then showed her the faces of the people she had hurt in her selfish pursuit of pleasure. She saw the sadness and disappointment in their eyes and felt a deep sense of shame wash over her. The demon continued to taunt her, reminding her of all the times she had prioritized her own desires over the well-being of others. Avery's mind was consumed with guilt and regret, and the demon fed off her negative emotions, intensifying her suffering. She realized that her constant craving for excess had led her to hurt other people, and now she was paying the price. The demon promised her that she would never be satisfied, that she would always hunger for more, and Avery knew that he was right. On the beginning of what felt like the 6th hour of hell, the demon turned his attention to Avery's once again. He reminded her of all the times she had lashed out in anger, all the hurtful words she had said to those around her. He taunted her, telling her that her anger had never truly solved anything, that it had only caused pain and suffering. The demon conjured up vivid hallucinations of people she had hurt in fits of rage, replaying the moments over and over in Avery's mind until she couldn't take it anymore. Avery's anger continued to grow and the demon fed on it eagerly. He made her feel like a puppet on a string, forcing her to relive her most rage-filled moments again and again. The demon whispered in her ear, encouraging her to give in to her fury and let it consume her. Avery struggled to resist, but the demon's hold on her mind was too strong. She felt like she was drowning in a sea of anger, with no hope of escaping his grasp. Avery began to realize that her anger had never truly solved anything, but it was too late. The demon had already taken hold of her mind and was using her own anger against her. She was trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment, reliving her past mistakes and feeling the pain of those she had hurt. And she was powerless to stop it. She could feel the pressure building all around her once again, and she screamed in agony at the pain as he danced around, watching her closely, reveling in her agony. She could no longer bear it. She fell to her knees with tears streaming down her face. Finally, honing in on her deepest insecurities and failures, it began to taunt her with all the opportunities she had squandered in her life, all the time she had let her laziness get the best of her. The demon whispered in her ear, telling her that she could have been something great if only she had tried harder, worked harder, been more disciplined. It showed her images of her past, times when she had the chance to achieve something significant, but had given up because it required too much effort. Moments played back where she had cut corners or taken shortcuts, ultimately resulting in failure. Avery felt trapped in a web of her own making, as the demon repeatedly whispered to her, "You could have had it all, but you were too lazy, too unambitious, and now look at you." It showed her the consequences of all of her combined actions, the missed opportunities, the wasted potential. She was consumed by guilt and self-loathing, feeling trapped and helpless, and as she looks up at her torturer of the mind, she collapses into the dark once again. What once was a bright, beautiful girl, now reduced to an unrecognizable heap on the ground. Defeated. There is a brief moment of silence and chill as she wakes up. She lays on the ground in dead silence. Unable to move, a broken husk. The silence is bliss, but she cannot feel joy because it seems to be over. In fact, she doesn't feel anything anymore. The girl who was once called Avery has been devoured by this sinister being. As she lay there in the peaceful forest, she was a mere shadow of the girl who had embarked on this journey what felt like only a day ago, but really took place over a long, arduous week. Her once bubbly personality had been shattered, and her mind had been picked apart by the demon who had fed from her very being. Her body was bruised and battered, her clothes torn and caked in mud. The forest was a stark contrast to her broken state, with its gentle breeze rustling the leaves and the birds singing their sweet melodies. For a moment, it seemed as though the forest was trying to heal her wounds, to soothe her shattered mind. But then, Avery let out a blood-curdling wail that shattered the peace of the forest. It was a sound of agony, of despair, of utter hopelessness. The birds fell silent, and the breeze stilled. It was as if the forest knew that it could offer no solace to the tortured soul lying there. And so, the wail echoed through the trees, a testament to the horrors that Avery had endured in that place, a reminder that even in the most serene of settings, darkness can lurk and torment those who dare to venture into it.